Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 99 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. We've got our live bracketology update today. I'm your host, Sean Bowles, and let's look at the predicted bracket that I put out this morning. I have a couple decisions or close things that I want to go over, and then at the end we can get to some questions. So, released this bracket a couple of minutes ago on the Instagram. There's a couple of storylines that I want to get to, and then we'll go from there. The first one is that a report came out yesterday that Houston would prefer the West region over the Midwest region, which was not what was previously thought. That means Houston will go out to the West, and that does affect the seeding, the regions for the 2 seeds and on because of the SEC teams having to be separated. So that's why we've got Houston over into the West, and that moves the second 2-seed SEC team, which we have Alabama right now, going out there with them. So the rule is that the first 4 teams from each conference cannot be in the same region. So Tennessee would pick the East over the West in this situation, and then Alabama would have to go out west. That does open the door for Michigan State to go to the Midwest. Now, it's not 100% that this rumor will be true. Houston could still be given the Midwest, and then that would shuffle things around significantly. We've got Alabama going to Houston's region, and then Tennessee going to the East regardless, though. And then Tennessee did overtake Alabama for the 5th overall spot. That just okay. We should be back. Hopefully that works. So then the next decision that we had to make here is the last 2 seed. We have Tennessee at the 5, Alabama at the 6, Michigan State at the 7. Pretty convincingly there. So the last 2 seed is up for grabs. It was really between 3 teams, St. John's, Texas Tech, and Kentucky. We can compare their numbers up here. So St. John's obviously has a much better record at 30-4, but significantly less quadrant 1 opportunities from Texas Tech and Kentucky. Kentucky, with 11 quad 1 wins, was there recently, but St. John's getting to above 500 in quad 1 without any Q2 losses. You see Tech at 10-5, but with 3 Q2 losses, and then Kentucky just 12-11 in the top 2 quadrants. So I don't think this is really controversial. I think St. John's will be getting this last 2 seed, and then we have that going out to the South region, which is Auburn's region. But again, these are the 3 teams that it was between, but based on sort of the results the last couple days, we think that St. John's has a better chance. These numbers on the left, KPI, strength of record, wins against bubble. Those are the resume metrics. Basically, who did you beat and where? Margin doesn't matter, none of that. These on the right, BPI, Ken Pom, and the T rank are predictive, basically, possession-by-possession stats. So resume metrics definitely help you get into the field more, and the predictives could come into play more for seeding. You do see Texas Tech with a significant advantage there, but we're going to go with St. John's here. Better Q1A winning percentage, better Q1 winning percentage, and then no losses outside that. 24-4 in meaningful games, which is the top 3 quadrants. The committee does look at that. So St. John's gets the last 2 seed, in my opinion. And then kind of the last seeds here all have some discussion that we need to do. Wisconsin and Maryland, I was between for the last 3 seed. You see here that the numbers are very similar. Resume numbers are essentially the same, 13 and 14.7. Maryland does have a little bit better predictives, but being that Wisconsin is still playing, Maryland isn't. You've got the same Q1 record, and then much more volume in Q2 for Wisconsin with a 10-1 rather than 6-1. So those 8 Q4 games could keep Maryland off the 3 line. So we're going with Wisconsin there right now. Iowa State also in there, and then the 2 teams that we mentioned in the last discussion. But I think Wisconsin gets the nod for the last 3 seed. This last 4 seed also changed today. It was between Michigan and Purdue for me. Michigan has sort of turned they look like they're playing really bad ball coming down the stretch, and they've turned it around here with 2 big performances win over Purdue, win over Maryland. So that definitely helps things for Michigan. You see here they do have better resume numbers than Purdue, a slightly worse predictives, but they have more Quad 1A wins, more Quad 1 total wins, and 2 less losses overall. That could be 1 if they lose today, but Michigan also won 2 out of the 3 meetings between these 2 teams. So I think it's Michigan's spot right now. Honestly, if the committee it didn't seed these teams until they played on Friday night, I think Michigan gets the nod here to go up to the 4 line. And that puts them in the West region for us. Purdue will go to the Midwest at the 5. Now, you can argue whether you want to go to the 4 or you want to go back to the 5. The Midwest region is in Indianapolis this year. So that they would get there for the Sweet 16. But we've got Michigan there now. And then the last 5 seed was between Ole Miss and UCLA. And Ole Miss kind of moved up a little bit without playing. A couple of their opponents have done well. And you see Ole Miss with a significantly better resume metrics, slightly worse in the net, and then slightly worse in the predictives. They do have a better Ken Palm, though, worse BPI, worse T rank. So this is really close. 8 and 10, 8 out of 18 versus 9 out of 17 is very similar. But we have one of those more Quad 1 wins in A, and then they both have a Q2 loss. And then UCLA has this Q3 loss, which is Minnesota at home. That will ding them a little bit. And this is very close. I mean, this is really a coin toss. I could see it going either way. But we gave Ole Miss the nod here because there's a lot of Big Ten teams here on the 4 and the 5. And the rule is you can't play a team that you've already played this year in the round of 64. You can only play a team in the round of 32 if you've played once. And they really want to avoid this, especially if they're in the same conference. So you could see some funny business around the 4, 5, and 6 line here because of that. Now, Michigan and Purdue played 3 times, so they cannot play in the round of 32. Michigan and Oregon played once. Michigan and Maryland played twice. So the only team that Michigan can be paired with here is Oregon in the Big Ten or another team. Or UCLA. They only played them once, too. So it is a little bit odd that you might see some teams bumped up or down a little bit because of this. And then another thing that is some little funny business is BYU. We've got them here in the last 6 seed, but not sure if anybody knows this. They cannot play on Sundays. It's part of their religious observances there at that school. So they have to play in a region that goes Thursday, Saturday. I think the East is Thursday, Saturday. So they can only play in one of the 2 regions, and then they have to play Thursday in the round of 64 too. They can't play in the Friday, Sunday, any of those locations. So you could see BYU drop down to the 7 just for that reason, but I didn't go into beyond the fact that the East plays Thursday and Saturday. BYU can be in the East, and that's as far as I went with it. I think they'll be here in this last 6 seed spot, but if they are in the 7, the committee might actually have them above some of the teams that are above them in the seeding, but it's going to be a religious thing they cannot play on Sundays. And, the path is a Thursday, Saturday, first weekend, and then the region that plays on Thursday and Saturday too. So BYU is pretty close to Illinois and Missouri. Could see either one of those teams getting the last 6 seed. And then we're looking at, so we're looking at splitting hairs between those 3. Let's actually pull up the comparison here. So obviously these numbers are all very close. Let me get the bracket out of the way. BYU slightly better in the resume, and pretty much the same with Missouri in the predictives. Illinois is not that far behind, though. I mean, they're 3-4-4 Quad 1A wins, 8-8-7 Quad 1 wins, and then BYU of a mid-major league, so you could see that bumped into the end. All right, I think the 8 and 9 seeds are pretty straightforward. Got all 3 of the Big East teams on the 8. Not that that really matters. Whether you're an 8 or a 9, it just matters what locker room you have, what jersey you're wearing. But I would be surprised to see any of these teams in the 8 or the 9 not there, because I think there's a little bit of a big drop-off after the team in last. All right, one more thing. We've got Drake at the 10 seed in the East. I think Drake is significantly the best resume of any of these mid-major winning leagues. They're 2-0 in Quad 1 and against an at-large team. And that is Vanderbilt, which is there too. We'll get to them in a second. But they have great resume numbers. The predictives are lacking a little bit, which it actually ends up being pretty good that they did win their league, because I'm not sure they would have made it in anyway. But they're 6-0 in the top 2 quads. They do have 3 Q3 losses. They were all in the league. But I think they get up to the 10. They have a pretty solid... They won the Charleston Classic back in November, which had a couple of tournament teams there. And, they have proven that they can beat a tournament team. That's why I think they'll be the highest of any, like the Colorado State, VCU, UC San Diego. I think Drake will get onto that 10 line. So now that brings us to the bubble. This is by far the most complex bubble that I've ever done. This is my 4th year doing this. And really, Vanderbilt and down are in the bubble. Now, I think every team above Vanderbilt, I can say with, I can pretty much guarantee that they'll be in the tournament. But Vanderbilt and down is where this thing gets really, really interesting. We're going to put all these teams on here, and we're going to see from here where we go. So I really don't think we can go past Texas here, and I can't see anybody past Texas really getting included into the field. So here's the bubble teams now. There are 5 spots right now for these 8 teams. That could become 4 if Memphis does lose later today. VCU also could. Let's put their resume in this mix right now in case they do lose later, because I think they're going to have to prepare for this. The committee's going to have to prepare for them to lose. The game might actually have started already, or if it doesn't start now, it starts soon. But there are 5 spots. There are at least 5 spots, maybe 6, now that we've added the A10 in here. This will leave us with the last 11 seed, or the last seed outside the last 4 in, the 4 in the last 4 in, and then the couple that are out. So we've seen Vanderbilt and West Virginia kind of really sort of go down here. They've kind of just lost a lot of games, and I don't think either of them will be left out, but they might get put into Dayton, especially West Virginia. The committee chair yesterday was on CBS talking about injuries playing a big factor, and if that player isn't going to be available for the tournament, you're going to be judged more on the time that you didn't have that player. West Virginia hasn't had Tucker DeVries for a while. I think since December. I don't think he played any conference games, but they did pick up a couple of their big wins in the non-conference. Now, they still did beat Kansas on the road without him and all that, so they'll be in, but I could see the committee bringing West Virginia to Dayton and just saying, like, hey, you got to prove it to us one more time. And so really these four teams, Vanderbilt, West Virginia, San Diego State, and Indiana, I think are all competing for that last spot outside of Dayton. And this is the order that I have it. Vanderbilt it could be Vanderbilt or West Virginia, but I'm going with Vanderbilt outside the first four because of the DeVries injury situation. So West Virginia to Dayton, San Diego State to Dayton, Indiana to Dayton. Now that leaves us with one spot, potentially zero. So this is the team that I think is truly in limbo today. I think it could be San Diego State or Indiana too, but I think I could see San Diego State, Indiana, Xavier, or Boise State being in this situation today. The true limbo spot. That is, if Memphis wins and gets the automatic bid from the American, they'll be in, and this team will be out. I think it's Xavier right now. I think the argument can be made for San Diego State, Indiana, or Boise State, but let's look at these numbers a little bit more carefully. So we have put Vanderbilt in, West Virginia to the first four, so 3 more spots in Dayton up for grabs. San Diego State, 52nd in the net. The predictives put them at 43.3. How about that? The exact same as West Virginia and Indiana. And then the predictives are very similar too, 46, 51, 51. West Virginia with 4 Q1A wins, 6. They do only have a meaningful games record of 14 and 13, but with so many of their games skewed towards Q1, I think they'll be in. So then we get San Diego State here. They're 1-2 in Q1A. Their one win was a neutral win against Houston in the Players Era tournament in Vegas. That's a really good win. The number 3 overall seed on a neutral. Remember that for a little bit. They have 2 other Quad 1 wins. And they do have 2 Q2 losses and a Q3 loss, which Indiana and Xavier do not have. Now let's go down to Indiana. Very good KPI numbers, strength of record and WAB, a little bit lower than San Diego State, and then the predictives are, essentially the same too. Indiana 1-6 in Quad 1A. They lost 2 Quad 1A wins recently. The Ohio State away game and the Purdue home game were in Quad 1A until Purdue got smoked by Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. So those go to Quad 1B, which is just kind of in the total Quad 1s here. But still, 4 out of 17, not a very good percentage there from Indiana, but they do have 4 wins. They have 2 wins against the field away at Michigan State, which is probably, you can argue how that stacks up against San Diego State's neutral Houston, but still, very even. And then Indiana's second best win is Purdue at home, 5 seed for us. San Diego State, after Houston, doesn't have any big wins outside of the Mountain West. And in the past, the committee has not really given teams the benefit of the doubt that have built their resume exclusively through the Mountain West. Now, San Diego State has that Houston win, so we think they'll be in. But I think Indiana's Michigan State and Purdue win stack up better against San Diego State's Houston win and then a bunch of 8, 9, 10s. San Diego State has 1 more win against the field. And then if you extend it to teams just out, both Indiana and San Diego State get 2 more with Boise State and Ohio State. But San Diego State and Indiana, very much a coin flip for me for this third to last in spot. The loser will get the second to last in spot, and then it comes down to the last spot in the field. So all of those teams are in. Let's take VCU off for now. So if Memphis doesn't win, I don't think any of these teams will be in. But if they do, there's 1 spot left. So Xavier, Boise State, North Carolina, and Texas. This is going to be. There's a reason to leave all of them out. Reason to bring any of them. Xavier, resume wise, 50.3. Predictives a little bit better. They're just 1-9 in Quad 1, 1-5 in Quad 1A, 2 Q2 losses. They still get over 500 in the top 3 quads, though, at 14-11. Now, their best wins, which is usually the tiebreaker in this, is at Marquette, so away against an 8 seed. They do have some wins against the Big East tournament teams, but it's, 8 and 9 seeds in the middle of the pack, similar to the San Diego State second and third and fourth best wins. Now we go to Boise State, and Boise is a little bit of an odd resume. They have very much, they did schedule well, and they were able to get Clemson to come to play them in Boise, Idaho this year. They beat them, so Boise's best win is home against a 5 seed, away against an 8 seed. Arguments can be made which one is better there. They did lose to Boston College in the Cayman Islands Classic, so that is Boise State's Quad 4 loss. They also have a Quad 3 loss, Washington State at home. They did beat St. Mary's, though, also not quite at home. It was in Idaho Falls, Idaho, so it does count as a neutral, but the committee will know that game was pretty much a home game for the Broncos. So you have your 2 best wins coming at home against 5, and I believe we have St. Mary's on the 7. So 5 and 7 at home is your best wins, and then you do have a bunch of Mountain West wins there too, around the 8, 9, and 10 line. Boise did lose both in the regular season to San Diego State, but they did beat them in the conference tournament, so they went 1-for-3 there. They also did beat New Mexico a couple nights ago in the semis, but they beat New Mexico at home also. They beat Utah State at home, so they haven't beaten a tournament team on the road like Xavier and Indiana have. So I do think that is something that might cost Boise State in the end over a Xavier or an Indiana. Now, those 3 teams, I think I can pretty confidently rank them: Indiana, Xavier, Boise. Now, North Carolina and Texas are a little bit of the wild cards here. The North Carolina athletic director he's not allowed to be in really any conversations that talk about North Carolina, but you have to think that maybe some of the other committee members might want to do something nice for their chairman. So this is an interesting one. North Carolina, pretty good resume numbers at 44 and good predictives at 31, but at the end of the day, their Quad 1 record and their record against the field, it's awful. 0-10 in Quad 1A, 1-12 in Quad 1, so 1-2 in the back half of Quad 1. Their only win against the field is neutral against UCLA at Madison Square Garden. So you still didn't beat a tournament team on the road like Xavier and Indiana did. And they also lost at home in Stanford in Q3, something that Xavier and Indiana did not do. So it doesn't come from a lack of opportunities, wins against tournament teams, but they played 7 games against tournament teams in ACC play, or 6. 3 against Duke, Louisville, and Clemson, and they didn't win any of them. And I think that is going to cost them in the end. They have a good net, obviously poor KPI, good strength of record, and their numbers are kind of up and down right now. And I just think the other teams deserve a spot more than North Carolina here. If Xavier and Indiana are already going to Dayton, there's not a need to put a big brand there, as they have done in the past, with Virginia last year, for example. But so that brings us to this. That brings us to Texas, and truthfully, Texas looked like they'd started to play their way back into it, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the whole body of work, and I think it's just too much for them to be included. Their resume numbers are still lagging behind the other bubble teams, and their predictives are 42. Good BPI, but in the 40s for the others. They do have 7 wins against the field, which is something that would be unprecedented in leaving them out. But also, only 2 teams ever with 15 losses have been at-large teams. It's been a while since then. And then they're 12-15 in meaningful games. Those 7 Quad 4 games that they played, they scheduled really poorly in the non-conference. They're in the 280s. Their best non-conference win was Ohio State on a neutral. I just don't see the committee, sort of breaking like decades of precedent here to get this Texas team in the field. They have 1 win against a tournament team on the road in Vanderbilt, but in terms of stacking that up against Xavier and Indiana, I just don't really see it right now. Trey Johnson's an awesome player, but they're 10-15 in quads 1 and 2. So I don't know. I don't know if they can be included. I think North Carolina has a better case than them, and then certainly the teams that we've gone over above them. But this bubble is really, really interesting. It could get smaller by even 1 today, or even 2. Let's talk about VCU for a second. And they play in the Atlantic 10 championship game today against George Mason. Obviously, if they win that, their fate is sealed. They're going to the tournament, and they won't be in the first 4. Automatic qualifiers cannot be there. So here's their resume right now. 46 across the resume metrics, which is good, and their predictives are actually great. So we could actually see them maybe even getting to the 10 line if they win their league. But here's where I think they probably don't get in if they lose today. George Mason is their opponent. Let's bring them up for a second. They're not going to get an at-large with a loss, but here's the number that's important for George Mason, 73. So in this world where VCU's put into the at-large pool, they lose a game against a 73rd ranked team on a neutral. That is quad 2. So that would bring their quad 2 record to 5-5. That is significantly worse than all of the teams that we just talked about. Indiana, Xavier, North Carolina, Texas, Boise, Xavier. So I think that is going to cost them if they do lose today. VCU does have to win, in my opinion. Also add on a quad 4 loss for VCU. That was to Seton Hall in the Charleston Classic that Drake and Vanderbilt were also in. And VCU left that tournament 1-2. Drake won it. They were 3-0. Vanderbilt lost in the championship. They were 2-1. So comparison to them way back then, they didn't do as great. And that 500 record in quad 2 with 10 opportunities is just not enough for me. So VCU does have to win to get in. Memphis does not, of course. So I think there's truly one bid stealer on the line today, and I think it's Xavier that is going to be the one sitting on the nervous side of things. But that is all the things that I wanted to go over. I know there's a few questions in the chat. Let's see. What's Indiana doing in? I think we already went over that. The big win against Michigan State has been sort of proven to be really important to the committee in the past, and then the reason why you're seeing this Indiana shift in the last 24 hours, whether it's the betting odds or bracketologists just slowly sliding them up, they haven't played. It's what the committee chair said yesterday with, who did you beat away from home? Did you beat a tournament team away from home? That was the first thing that he said was the most important. So that moves teams like Indiana up a couple ranks, I think, and that's why you've seen it go to minus 275 right now. They still could be left out. You could say, well, they had 17 quad 1 opportunities, only won 4 of them. That's no more impressive than going 1-9 or 1-10. Percentage points wise, it is a little bit, but not really. And then the second question we have here is, will Drake actually pull off the upset? That's a good one. I think, let's go to Drake's team page for a second. And I think, yes, I think Drake is a really good basketball team. They play in the Missouri Valley. There is something that they haven't played since last Sunday, and it'll be, at least 4 more days, maybe 5 until they play. But here's their team page. They were 17-3 in the league, 30-3 overall, 71st in offense, 45th in defense. They offensive rebound the ball at a good rate. They get to the free throw line. They turn over teams. They don't give up offensive rebounds. I mean, a lot of these green numbers are good. They score from 2 at an efficient rate, which is important, I think, in some of these big arenas where teams don't usually shoot threes very well. The thing is that they also give up a lot of twos, 54%. That's 304. That's really, really bad. They're good from 3, though, defensively, so maybe a team with size that just gets it inside can get past them, but this is going to be matchup-based for me, I think, if Drake is going to be able to win. Pretty impressive resume. They did play in this Charleston Classic. They beat Miami, Florida Atlantic, and Vanderbilt, all pretty convincingly by double digits. You see they didn't make many threes against Miami, still beat them. Just 5 against Vanderbilt, beat them. But, they beat Kansas State on the road. Kansas State's not a tournament team, but they're a Big 12 team. Belmont isn't bad. They beat them by 19. Like, this is a pretty solid resume all around. They did have a couple of hiccups in here. A road game to Illinois, Chicago, and home to Murray State. But their only loss since essentially the beginning of the year, 5 days into the year, was a 2-point loss to Bradley. It was a top 100 team. So, and then they did, of course, avenge that with a 15-point win in the conference tournament. So Bradley is really good. Or not Bradley. Well, Bradley is good, but Drake is really good, and I think that if they can get to the 10 line, like they'll have a better chance of winning. In my bracket here, I actually have them playing Illinois in the first round. That would be an interesting one. Not gonna speculate on the matchups yet until we have it. But matchup dependent, I think Drake might be able to pull off the upset in round 1. They've won 30 times already. Only a couple of teams have done that: St. John's, UC San Diego, and Duke. So just a couple hours away. I know this video is probably going to mean nothing once the real bracket comes out, but if you want to check out where your team is, this is where I've got them. So I think we are going to be back today, later, for episode 100, which is going to be our post-selection Sunday reaction show. And then later in the week, we'll get into a couple regions and where we think things could go right, things go wrong for all the teams. So